You want to, Gary, you want to go first, or Chip, whatever?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess I really was still, attached to toys and comics. I've got about like 40 giant things of toys in my basement for some reason I don't understand. And my father ran a dime store. He brought home all of these comics with the covers ripped off, like giant stacks of them in 1958. Right. And 1958, my grandma had a nervous breakdown in Oklahoma. We left Brownsville and never went back. And I left the comics behind. And now I buy comics from 1958.
Wow.
Something like that.
Do you recycle any of the 1958 comic material in your work?
Yeah, well, I don't think about it, but I probably do. I mean, Turok, Son of Stone, Magnus Robot Fighter. Magnus wears a little dress. Jimbo wears a little dress.
Indeed.
Indeed, he does. I don't know why, but he still does.
Huh. Yeah. Chip, what about your...
I mean, there's a lot, but I think just because of the present company, I should say that I first... because I'm considerably younger than Gary.
And look considerably younger, too.
No, I was in college when Raw magazine came out, and that was when I first encountered Gary's work. And I think it was Raw #2 that you did the cover for, and just totally blew me away. And up to then, I have to say, yes, there's a very mainstream DC Comics kid, but I was in college and like my horizons were expanding or whatever. And that was also my first experience with an actual comic shop, which they had in the university town where I went. And so all this Raw thing appears, and it's this big, and it has all these wonderful little things that are tipped in, and that was also when I began reading Mouse, because it was a pamphlet within that, and the production values on those things were absolutely astounding. And up to then, I was certainly aware of independent comics, but as a kid, like if I looked at Crumb, it just scared the shit out of me. Like I didn't understand it, and it felt very upsetting. Whereas Raw to me felt like possibilities in terms of design, in terms of cartooning, and you had all these, and some of it I didn't like, but some of it I was just like completely blown away by. But it wasn't just the comics themselves; it was the physicality of the publication and the publication design.
I mean, I sort of feel like Raw really did blow open a whole new aesthetic in terms of how people dealt with stuff. So you were at university then. Did you ever do any of your own kind of publications or student type things that?
Not really, because I was just too busy working on my assignments that I had to do. I mean, we had to make a magazine when I was a junior, so in that sense, yes. But that was more of a showcase of that in itself was like a portfolio piece that was supposed to show, and we had to do our own drawing, we had to do our own photography, and we had to do our own found objects that were tipped into the publication of whatever it was, and you had to write up a perspective that this is what this magazine is, and this is who it's for, and this is what it's about, and so.
Did those get published in quantity though, or they just exist?
No, they were one-offs.
Right. Huh. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Gary, when you started doing mini comics yourself, were you using anything as a model for those? Because it's a weird format.
Yeah, I was really inspired by Ed Ruscha's books. I discovered Ed Ruscha's, I don't know if you know, Ed Ruscha, West Coast pop artist. You have to know. Started doing these kind of odd books that were objects, and they were strange. And one thing I liked about modern art in the 60s was there was a lot of humor, like Oldenburg and Ruscha. And there was I thought it was kind of humor. I thought art magazines were humor magazines at first.
No.
And
I don't think you were wrong.
No, they're still a little bit like that. But Ed Ruscha, definitely, a few palms, a few small fires, Sunset Strip, and I found those in Dallas at the Art Museum. So I came to L.A. and I quick printed my first comic on like a Western. And
what was the first one that you did?
It was called Hup. It was about a samurai kind of character on heavy cardstock, and it was
color cover.
Had a photocopy cover. I had some friends. I think it was printed. Probably had friends I'd gone to school with who went to work for Xerox, and so they photocopied some things from me, and I hand bound them and stapled them. And then after that, I did photocopy comics later. But for the first one, were quick print comics.
I mean, do you guys think that it's important for beginning artists or designers or anything like that to strive for some kind of original impulse in their work? Or, I mean, is it better or maybe even necessary to start off, sort of mining other people as, like, taking magazines and sort of almost like aping formats initially? Or
Yeah, I always ape
it's hard
stuff.
to...
Yeah. No, don't try to be original. Forget that.
I mean, do you need to work in? I mean, what I'm curious is if you think you need to work into that, and you're better off starting in a sort of mimetic process when you're doing things.
For me, yeah, I really like combining things. I really like putting things together that don't belong together and see what results. But I think that people worry about a style, and there's a lot of pressure in art schools to have a style in some art schools, and I think style catches up with you.
That's your...
Yeah, I mean, one of my great design heroes in school was this guy named Peter Saville, who was the art director for Factory Records, and so he designed Joy Division, and then when they became New Order, and so all these albums, I loved the music, and then these albums were coming out as I was in school from 82 to 86, and I would go to the local record store and see them, and if I had enough money, I would buy them. But what I loved was instead of having a style, they had what I would call a sensibility, which meant that you could start over every time, which I think was right, but there was an aesthetic intelligence at play, and the really interesting thing for me is, you listen to the Joy Division music, you listen to the New Order music, which is some of my favorite music of all time, and it really is this ecstatic post-punk and then into a kind of electro disco. But there was no visual hint to that. There was this great sort of plurality of, we're not going to show a disco ball because the music's already doing that for you. So we're going to show you Italian futurist design that's been, repurposed for this particular album. And just as a collection of work that was really, really influential to me for, okay, you did that book cover, now you've got a completely different book by a completely different author, and you're going to start over, and you're going to do something that's right for that book, as opposed to, I don't think I've designed anything yellow in some time. So I guess we're due.
I mean, in your own work, Chip, working with books, do you always really read the manuscript stuff beforehand, or is it sometimes?
I read it, and I read as much as I can, or as much as is available. Like Murakami, that all has to get translated, and we're working like a year ahead. So I only had the first third of that to read, but that was enough to inform what the package should look like. And also, you don't want to give away the ending anyway. So I read as much as I feel I need to know to inform what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. So if you guys, this is directed to both of you could create the perfect publication, what would it be called?
Penis.
Penis? Penis, the magazine?
No one's done it.
Would its content be pictorial or prose or poetry?
Well, how much time do you have? I don't know. That was just a Freudian slip. You go ahead.
I'm not sure. I'd definitely have to think about it. It reminds me, though, that I got to do an album in Japan that I wanted to call Smurfy Beaver Shots, and that's still a name that's floating around that might have...
No, wait, that's the one they changed to Pray for Smurf?
Yeah.
So it was like really, that's shortened for Pray for Smurfy Beaver Shots?
Yeah, it was supposed to be Smurfy Beaver Shots, but...
I think we should pair that up with Penis.
And, right.
Yeah.
It'd be like something... Sister
like
publications.
Chip Kid Book One where they both open up together.
Yeah.
Or you get like a special subscription if you subscribe to both of them.
Yeah, that's great. That would be fantastic. Yeah. And you get like free ribbed condoms. That'd be fantastic.
I mean, your move into writing fiction,
mm-hmm.
First book being The Cheese Monkey, the second one being The Learners, I mean, it seems to have been quite successful in a lot of different ways. And I'm curious if you feel like the writing process is similar or related to, or is it separate from a visual thing?
It's my little soundbite is writing is designing with words, and so you're doing a similar process, but the pictures are gone now, and you're taking these 26 little abstract symbols and you're putting them in these certain combinations so that if you do it a certain way and then you show it to somebody, you will put all these experiences into their heads, which I think is just a miracle.
Well, that's sort of, I mean, that's almost the exact opposite then of the process of doing a book design, where it seems like you take this narrative and try to compress
You're
an important
trying to distill
part of
it into like a haiku of the story.
Right. And I mean, Gary, if you've done some like cover work, like for stuff that you haven't written.
You mean
is
like
that,
book covers?
Yeah.
Book covers? Yeah, occasionally. I mean, commercial art, I'm really like trying to solve problems. But so again, I do want to absorb as much of it as I can, because you're kind of restating it or you're giving a clue. But yeah.
Well, you guys, you've both done musical stuff now also. Gary, yours has a slightly longer history. Chip, yours is more recent. And is that similar to the visual impulse, or is that something that's completely set aside from it?
Well, it's kind of synesthetic in some ways. I mean, like light shows are kind of like painting with light, and music's kind of like painting with sound. But it's also, it gets me out of the house. You know, I stay in a room and I make art all the time and I don't go out. And so it's nice to play music all night, one night a week with people, and then go play little shitholes in Bushwick and, you know, have some fun, lose more of my hearing. And so it's been a total joy. Making music's great. And really it's kind of about listening, since I'm not a real musician. And as I'm repeating over and over and over, I just got a French horn, and I'm completely stoked about having this French horn so I can be even more peculiar than before.
Nice.
But it's fantastic. It's a fantastic object. Smelly. Horns are smelly. Germy. They're really germy and smelly.
You should have gotten a new one.
True. Well, I got one from a girl, you know, nice-looking girl.
Where it had been.
Yeah, well, we'll find out, perhaps. We'll take it to new places it's never been before.
Chip, Art Break, is that?
Art Break is a sort of result of me teaming up, reuniting with a guy that I used to play in the dorms with at school. And we met in the mid, like 2004 in New York. And he was living in New York at the time with his wife and little baby. And we just met at a reading. And he said, hey, do you still play? And I said, no, but, you know, I'd really like to again. I played the drums. So coming to New York with your drum kit is not really something I would heartily recommend for a studio apartment. So I kind of gave it up. But I was really itching to do it again. And so we started jamming in this, you know, cheap but great little studio in the East Village. And then we started writing. And it was sort of like magic, because I don't write music. I mean, I played since I was in elementary school, but I would come up with these melodies and I would sing them, and then he'd figure out what key I was singing in and transpose it all, and then I'd write the words, and we were really starting to put a lot of this stuff together. And then he had a second baby and moved to Fort Worth, Texas. And I was ready to fucking kill him. So we've maintained a long-distance working relationship. But one of the really sweet, wonderful things is he then got a job as a math teacher in a high school in Fort Worth, which was just out of necessity. He doesn't like teaching math. But what he's managed to do in the last year and a half is create a music program there for the kids to play rock and roll or play whatever they want, and to write and to record. And so he's really started this school of rock. And I think a lot of the stuff that we did as Art Break and were able to put on the web, and we made videos and all this kind of thing, helped him be able to do this. And I went there a month ago, and I wrote a song for the kids, and we rehearsed it and played it, and it was just amazing. So, it's really, really fun, and to be able to share it with other people is just fantastic.
Now, you guys have both taught art school. You guys both involved in the New York School of Visual Arts for a while, and you both went to art school. I was curious, what was the worst advice that both you got as a student, or perhaps that you gave as a teacher?
Gee, the worst advice. I had a great experience at art school. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm thinking while Chip's thinking, I'm thinking the worst advice, stay in school was probably the worst advice I ever gave like an art student. If people don't want to be in art school, they might as well not be in art school. And you don't have to be in art school, but you have to be ready to struggle right then. And I had a wonderful time in art school. I would have gone to grad school, but my work, it was what didn't happen.
Right.
But teachers that said bad things to me. I don't know. I had a teacher once, and I asked him what the worst thing about teaching was, and he said sharing my secrets with students. I thought, wow, that's not very generous, you know.
I not that I mean this to be a little infomercial, but like a lot of this stuff I put into the Cheese Monkeys. Right. But there was this woman, my first drawing teacher, who said, "Now just remember, your first 1,000 drawings are your worst," which made me want to just stop drawing. And
I say that to students.
Well,
I use that voice.
I taught for 6 years at the School of Visual Arts in New York, senior graphic design portfolio, and it was a real transition time between doing it by hand and computer and all of that stuff. And I think probably one of the questionable pieces of advice I gave to one young student is, if you don't turn that fucking cell phone off right now, I'm going to throw it through the window.
Oh, I told a student.
But this was very early on. This was like 1994.
Oh, so it was one of those huge cell phones?
Yes. It was like the shoe phone in Get Smart. And it rang in the middle of class, and he took the call.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, I think if anybody wants, we'd turn it open right now to a couple of questions from the audience.
I think they're dying to eat.
Yeah, I know. You know, we'll give it like another couple minutes. Any? Yes.
Well, I've studied to be a painter, and I'm still a painter. I'm represented by Frederickson Frieser in New York, and I have a show up with. I collaborate with Joshua White on light shows, and we just got to do this tremendous show in Detroit, where they turned the museum over to us, and we've done a giant light and graphic installation. So I'm trying to do fine art. I don't have anything against fine art, and that's where I'm coming from. Comics were an accident. I saw Zap Comics, and I got excited about drawing comics. And it seemed to me at the time in the 60s that what could be considered painting was broader and broader. And so I thought comics could be considered part of my painting, and I kind of still do. I mean, they operate in different ways, but I'm an art nerd, totally.
They just started teaching the history of graphic design when I was in college. The first textbook came out. So that was relatively late in the game in terms of art history, what I would call art history, but just learning about the Russian constructivists and the De Stijl movement in Holland, the Italian futurists, the Works Project administration in the U.S. That really completely changed the way I looked at, because I never saw that stuff until school. Now, whether you would consider that fine art or not, I don't know, but that was a great...
But art history. Art history.
Yeah, well, graphic design history. But I mean, yes. I mean,
to me, like, I'm kind of shocked that I'm teaching in a cartoon program at SVA, but I'm kind of shocked. I love my students. They're totally talented. They're wonderful people, but they don't often have a giant sense of art history.
No.
And 20th century art is fantastic explosion of what the possibilities are. And a lot of students know 10 years of art really well, or 10 years of what they're interested in, but, there's more.
Yes.
First of all, thanks so much for doing this with us. It's awesome to hear about your experiences. It's really inspiring. I have a question for Gary. Can you talk about your
I'm deaf. I'm sorry. You have to speak up a little bit. Yeah. It was like being allowed to play in the sandbox really hard. Like, here's a sandbox, get in there and play, and don't get out and keep playing. It started, I was doing a lot of graphic arts, and Paul and Associates approached me to do a free poster for the first stage show. And I went to see Paul, I didn't know who he was, and I saw that we had a lot in common. I was in a performance art group after college, and we did comedy and Boonraku puppets and shadow puppets and stuff, and so I asked if I could design everything, so I did. And worked with him a lot of things, and it had a long history. And we wrote the first version. We got a development deal at Paramount, wrote the first version of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And a story I love to tell, as Paul says, oh, I love that story, was when we went into the office on Wilshire, and we would go, Paul would pick me up in his car every day. We would go to the office, and he had bought this giant can of almonds. And over 8 months, we ate all the almonds except one. And when he got tired, he would shake it by my head and say, I'm the devil, I'm the devil. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
The question was that it seems this gentleman moved to the West Coast from Boston recently and feels as though there's a great flowering of graphic arts out here in terms of street material and publications. And if there's something afoot that's going to make this a national thing that perhaps is a little bit more evolved here, or whether it's a localized phenomenon.
I think Juxtaposed Magazine makes it a national phenomenon if we're talking about street art in a way. You know, this is like something that goes across the nation. It's a magazine for young people. It's not my favorite art in the world. I like a lot of the art that's in it, but the internet. I mean, having the tools that you have now. I mean, it's totally different. We had to cut and paste and seek and extrapolate from tiny fragments and so on, which had to do with this fetish part. Right. Just trying to find out what was out there, and you could find a tiny thing and try to make it explode. So yeah, I would. So I don't know. Now it's kind of like a maximalist movement as opposed to like a minimalist. Minimalism was things were rarefied, and now it's just like, if I draw on this for 5 million hours, people are going to be impressed, you know, and it'll work. It's not. I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but I'm much more expedient. But we're not talking about me again. So sorry, we're stopping with. The
music. I'm spoiled because I'm in New York. So the Mocha Fest. I went to the new Brooklyn Comics Books Fest last fall, and I mean I see tons of amazing, wonderful, wonderful stuff.
It's getting too big quickly. Like every year, it's like exponentially bigger and bigger. No, I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Right, but it
was neat when it was 100 people, and then it's like 500 people, and then 1,000 people.
So there's no safety in numbers for you.
Not in my. They won't fit in my room.
Well, I think everybody is very hungry. At least I know that I can see some hungry faces. You're not. That's because you were.
I just ate.
You just ate. So I think we'll wrap it up right now. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank especially Chip and Gary for participating in this. And thank you.
Thank you.
Before you guys all take off, we have a raffle. We have a really, really nice T-shirt and poster that Gary and Chip have signed, and Megan here, our assistant, is going to raffle it off.
All right, so at this time, if you could please take out your tickets, and we'll see who's the lucky recipient of a very nice Shelf Life limited edition tee and signed poster. Okay, so is numbers 1002 here? Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right, there's going to be one more winner. It's either a poster or a T-shirt. 1271. Yeah. Woo.